Planning a trip to Portugal? Whether you're exploring Lisbon, surfing in Ediceto, or road tripping through the Alentejo, staying connected is essential. I use Airalo every time I travel, even on some surfboat trips, adventures to the Maldives. So when we connected to collaborate, I was really genuinely happy. Airalo's eSIMs give you instant data the moment you land in a foreign country. No queues, no physical SIM cards, just seamless, reliable coverage. Travel smarter, stay connected, download Airalo before your next adventure. Follow this link in the show notes to get connected today. This is Justin West for Podcast Portugal. I'd like to extend a really warm welcome to Charles Whitney. He is the founder of DeskAmigo, something I know absolutely zero about. We were just having a laugh earlier, off mic, of course, because this is something called a productivity platform. It supports individuals and teams in working with greater focus, structure, and intention. It's basically technology, operations, and all about sort of performance systems. So I'm going to let Charles sort of describe a little bit better what it's all around, what it's all about, because I'm going to give my own little bit of perspective. The podcast is growing so fast. I have issues with calendars and emails and contacts and also the sales part when we have a team of salespeople. But also, it's just negotiating all of these things and making it very clean. And I'm taking a little bit of a guess. That's what productivity is all about. But I'm gonna let Charles describe a little bit better what it's about, and maybe he could sort of give me some pointers. So, Charles, what sort of prompted you to begin developing DeskAmigo?
Well, yeah, thanks for having me, Justin.
Welcome.
So it really sort of began. So my background is in commercial real estate. I worked in Africa primarily as a emerging markets consultant. So dealing with helping people sort of negotiate leases in office buildings, or sell or acquire assets in emerging markets. So I did that for 10 years, and my main sort of angle was that I was a valuer. So I was really with the ROCS. So I was really my brain is always primed to see sort of see value in property, and sort of also to notice inefficiency if property, if real estate's not being used to sort of its maximum potential. And really sort of what it came down to was the idea for DeskAmigo, I think, is super simple. And it's kind of what makes why it's garnered a bit of attention in the press and stuff, I think, is because a lot of people would assume something like this exists already. But very simply, it's an online marketplace where any business that has space, which could be used by remote workers, can list that space on our platform effectively for rent on an hourly basis, and where that or on a daily basis potentially as well. But we can come to that later. Really, what it comes down to is you're right to mention productivity. I think because one of the things that's clear if you look at some of the studies that have been done on this is that people who work remotely generally find that they are slightly more productive when they go and work in a cafe or a library or something like that, because there's less distractions than there are at home. And that's kind of where the productivity angle comes in. But the real genesis of it goes back to basically COVID. I mean, like COVID sort of caused a huge shift in the way that people work. Obviously, I think it goes without saying, but I saw it from a slightly different angle than the average person, because I was working in commercial real estate. I had lots of clients who were coming to me. I'm sure you can imagine, like sort of office tenants stuck in 10-year leases, 15-year leases. It's not uncommon for office tenants to sign these sorts of leases, coming to me and my company in a panic about how can we renegotiate, because 75% or 100% of our staff are working from home, but we've got hundreds of thousands of square meters of office space that we're renting across the world and spending millions a month potentially on that space. And what happened really during COVID, and especially since then, is there's been a sort of like trickle down towards more and more flexible solutions for where people work. And so lots of people, if you consider sort of the different kind of strata of office spaces being traditional office spaces, and then flex office spaces, and then on the sort of more flexible side, co-working spaces. What you had was a lot of office tenants moving into flex office. Even though you'd pay more for flex office, they were happy to pay that extra bit so that they could, for example, scale their workforce up and down quickly, or rearrange the size of their space in a more dynamic way to accommodate that. And then lots of people that were in flex office moving into co-working spaces, and then from people that were in co-working spaces going to complete remote work kind of thing. And so there was this big shift in the sort of dynamics of the office market, which I was aware of anyway, like I said, because I was up close and personal with it. But it was really sort of once we emerged from the pandemic, and so I live near Lisbon. I don't live in the city itself, but close enough that it's like the main place that I would go to if I was meeting friends or whatever. And I started to notice more and more cafes and restaurants were putting up, especially the ones that were more popular with remote workers, putting up signs either banning or restricting the use of laptops.
Yeah.
And that was just an interesting thing for me because I'd never seen them before. So I started to pay more attention to that. And then I started, because COVID ended, I started traveling again, and I would see these signs in places that you wouldn't really even expect. I mean, you can imagine in London maybe, or like Amsterdam, you would see these sorts of that you would see this sort of problem. But I saw no laptop signs in cafes in places like Tbilisi in Georgia. I saw them in Guatemala City, places you wouldn't expect really. And so I knew it was a global issue. And the signs themselves became sort of a symbol of fascination for me because they were a very clear kind of indication of a problem, and like, I guess I think one thing that I've learned more and more over time is that if you're starting a business, you have to identify the problem that you're solving. Like this is, every good business, I guess, is a problem solution equation basically. And so these signs became a sort of, I wanted to see if that problem could be solved. Like the problem was, okay, people want to work in your nice sort of beautifully designed cafe. Increasingly, you're no longer willing to accommodate these types of customers. How can we sort of bridge that gap, basically? How can we build a product that's going to allow, allow those people to work in those spaces, but in a way which is satisfactory for the owners of those businesses? And so that's what we did. We basically said, in 2023, we did a large survey. I did this in my spare time, but I got a Portuguese guy to help me. And we went around and spoke to about 300 odd cafe and restaurant owners, mainly in Lisbon, but we also went to Ericeira, which I know you'll know because you're into surfing.
Yeah.
And we also went to Peniche, and just to see what the differences were like in sort of non-Lisbon areas, basically. And it was basically an attitude survey for these business owners about remote workers. Like, how do you feel about them? How often do you have them? That kind of thing. And one of the things that was very, very clear from that survey was that you might think the reason why cafes and restaurants have a problem per se, sort of with remote workers, is because it's like an economic problem, basically. If you own a cafe with 10 seats, and every single one of them is occupied by a remote worker who's ordered an espresso and is sitting there for 2 or 3 hours, that's going to like run you out of business quite quickly. But actually, the interesting thing was, with hospitality people, even though they are business owners, they don't think like normal business owners really. They are hospitality people through and through. And so the refrain that we heard more than anything else was something along the lines of, it's not fair, basically. These people aren't treating me fairly because I pay for the air conditioning, I pay for the electricity and the gas and the Wi-Fi, and the rent, of course. And these people come into my space and basically they're taking the mick. That was kind of the general refrain that we heard from these business owners, which was interesting for me to hear. And after a while, I mean, I agreed with them. I do understand, especially once you consider that, the profit margin on food and drink is terrible, as I'm sure you would know. Everyone knows it's a very difficult way to make a living. especially as an independent, small cafe or restaurant or
Mm.
whatever. And so we basically um, tried to build a platform to solve the problem from their perspective. And basically what it looked like was, sorry, just to go back one step, the real revelation for me was that when we said to them, okay, we understand that you don't particularly sort of like these types of customers coming into your place as is. What would it take for you to feel happy? For you to feel that they are paying their fair share? And once we sort of gathered that information, that was the light bulb moment for me, just because I knew that it was very reasonable what they were asking for, and that people would be willing to pay for it. Because basically what it came down to was they said, if we knew when they were coming and when they were leaving, and we could decide what times of the day that we wanted to make our space available to these types of customers,
Mm-hmm.
and also if we could guarantee ourselves a minimum amount of money per hour, like a minimum sort of profit per hour, not spend, crucially, but profit, then they would be happy. And when we asked them, well, how much would you want per hour? And the answer was it was generally between 2 and 3 euros an hour.
Well,
I knew immediately that that was reasonable, that people would be willing to pay it, because if nothing else, because that works out about the same as a co-working space,
mm.
if not cheaper. And so that's basically what we're doing. We're kind of taking the co-working space market and opening it up so that small cafes and restaurants, but also hotels, private members clubs, any business that has those ingredients that a remote worker needs, can tap into that market by listing a table or two on our platform for rent, generally on an hourly basis. But some of them also do create kind of half day packages or all day packages where you get lunch included in the price and things like that. So
Nice.
that's basically what DeskAmigo is. I hope I
That
did it
is
justice there and
a
explained it clearly.
fantastic explanation. I immediately know. I immediately can see the problem, and you described yeah. What a. I mean, I'm talking from my own and my wife Rita's perspective as well, because we live on a farm. Basically, we're about 43 minutes exactly from where my team goes to school, our son. And so sometimes, to maximize the day, we drop him off at school, and then we sort of do some remote working in the city in Beja. And when I enter into one of these cafes, or it's completely crazy because the library there doesn't have Wi-Fi, which maybe is an
Yeah,
intention. And I enter in one of these cafes and I actually sort of feel a little bit guilty, I actually, so I order something that I don't really want and make sure we keep topping up with coffee. And so I'm getting really
yeah,
wired. But if I could, like your platform is offering, if I could pay something and then feel like not entitled, but feel a lot more comfortable to stay and do my work and not feel like, I'm in the way of people coming in as well. Like I'm sitting there and I've got a coffee and I know I've been there for like an hour or two, and there's an old couple come in. I just have to get up. I pack my stuff up and give them the table, because yeah, that is very cool. And and our co-workspace in Beja, it's got a waiting list. It's really difficult. We're on a waiting list and we have to wait for a new building to be built. So we don't have that option. The library is like I just said, has no Wi-Fi, which is, I guess, in some ways interesting because you can just go in there and read, but it's hopeless for us. But we need to find a nice space to work. Yeah, so I mean, actually, what we've been doing is, we have a jujitsu. We have a jujitsu dojo, so we go in there. There's Wi-Fi in there, and we in between the classes we sort of go in there. But actually, maybe they would be up for going on your platform and offering their space outside of the normal office hours, or outside of the normal tutoring hours. Yeah, that's very
yeah.
cool.
There's a couple. You mentioned a couple of really interesting points there that I'd like to pick up on. Like, so firstly, I mean, in terms of having, one of the things that we do have on the platform is, probably more so than any other sort of remote work platform, is this kind of level of variety. So we do have places, like alternative places to work. So we do have, for example, places where there's a Pilates studio next door or whatever. So you can go along for the day, do some co-working, and then go next door or do some yoga and Pilates afterwards or before your sort of co-working session. We've got some surf schools that are signing up to the platform where they're going to build a kind of remote working slash um, surf lesson sort of day package, basically, where you go and work in their space for the day and then you end the day with a surfing lesson. So I think that that's one thing that we are trying to do, is bring a lot more sort of variety to people's work days, sort of over and above what traditional co-working spaces can provide. But I think I really want to pick up on this idea of guilt, because it's a really interesting thing for me, and it's something which I can relate to. And I do think generally, I don't want to speak for everyone, but there is, especially in Lisbon, there is a sort of kind of, I want to say sort of like expat guilt that exists, where you sort of don't want to be that person, you know. You don't want to be that sort of that annoying sort of foreign guy with your laptop in a local cafe. I feel that totally where I live anyway. So like, for example, I'm not as remote as you are in terms of being, you know, properly out in the countryside there, but like within walking distance of my apartment, there's maybe 3 or 4 cafes, and I don't want to alienate those people, you know, by like turning up every day with my laptop, and so I just don't want to be that guy. That was always sort of the reason why I didn't particularly enjoy the experience, because like you said as well, you're never really sure how much you're supposed to buy. You're never really sure whether that person's happy with you being there. And that's a huge part of what we're sort of doing because obviously we're a marketplace. You have to. I think I've kind of illustrated the value we create for the businesses, but in terms of the value we create for remote workers, it's really about that sort of frictionless sort of we're trying to create a frictionless sort of way for people to gain access to these spaces. And the thing is, so in your case, Justin, if you were to book that place in advance, you would know, firstly, that seat was waiting for you, because when you make the booking request to our platform, they have to either accept or reject. So if they've accepted, the terms are set, you've paid, the seat's waiting for you. You know you're going to get a power outlet, because they'll guarantee that through the platform. You know that you know that you're going to get Wi-Fi, because again, that these are things that they have to sort of specify on the listing. They know, you know, whether you can bring your pet, you know, it's things like that. So basically all of the kind of ambiguity is taken out of the situation, and you know you're allowed to be there, you've paid to be there, and you pay for 2 hours, €5. You always get a complimentary drink when you arrive. So if you pay €2.50 for the hour, you've almost paid, and you get a free coffee complimentary coffee when you arrive. You've practically paid for that coffee with your fee. But it's just a way of sort of them getting certainty, and you can sit there kind of without any of that sort of low hum of anxiety about whether you're really allowed to be there or whatever. And generally speaking, we give people these very small sort of they're called table tents. You know, they're sort of like triangle, sort of pyramid shaped sort of menus that you get in restaurants sometimes. It's just a very small thing that you put on your table, indicating that you're a DeskAmigo customer, and in that way the staff know that you're there and you've paid, and they don't need to sort of harass you for drinks or anything. But it also just gives you a bit of peace of mind, knowing, okay, not only do the staff know, but hopefully over time, as people get to know what DeskAmigo is, that you won't be considered one of those sorts of people that is coming in and taking the mick, you know, by sort of sitting there for hours and hours. So that's kind of what we wanted to do. I think I used the expression bridging a gap earlier, or bridging a space between two people or two parties that would be willing to do business but don't currently have a way to do it, basically.
It's basically communication, isn't it? It's like, we're here, we invite you, and you guys need it, we're here. So it makes a lot of sense. And this is just available currently in Portugal.
So we started off just in Lisbon, and sort of by sort of marketing and stuff, we did end up attracting a few places up in Porto. We've got a few places in the Algarve, and one in Funchal. Weirdly, it just sort of popped up on the platform one day. But at the moment we're sticking to just Portugal. We could relatively easily press the button and go into other markets as well, because we don't just work with small businesses, although that was always sort of our angle initially. But for example, there's a hotel chain called quite well known called Mama Shelter,
Yeah.
And they I think they have a place in Dubai actually. But they're a French company, but they have places all over. Like they've got a ton of places in France, a place in Madrid, I think, or Barcelona. They've got a place in London, certainly. And so we do really good sort of business for them. And if we wanted to, we could push a bit harder, but we're deliberately. I'm sort of reluctant, little bit reluctant to push it too quickly outside of Portugal. I'd rather sort of solidify and sort of have Portugal as the launch pad, but also like the case study,
Yeah.
so that we can demonstrate once we do move into these other markets that what we're doing is actually working and actually generating revenue for these companies. I think one thing I think I didn't add was one thing that does differentiate us as well is that firstly for the venue for the restaurant or the cafe, it's completely free. There's no cost
Okay.
associated with being on the platform, so they can create a listing for free, and if they set a €2 an hour, they get to keep 100% of that. We don't touch any of that fee. The way that we make money is, I hasten to add, because lots of people wonder how we make money, is that we just add a small transaction fee to the person making the booking of 5%. So it's
Okay.
it's a very modest fee that we're sort of making. We have no intention of ever charging the venue, and this is something which there's practical reasons for that, but there's also sort of romantic reasons, I guess you could say. Like I do genuinely want to create a business that helps specifically like small independent businesses stay alive. It's a nice and beautiful thing that in
Yeah.
Portugal and some other places, those places still exist. And and I'm sure in the UK we've lost a lot of those sorts of
Yeah,
businesses.
I was going to say actually, because it's a really good opportunity for businesses that perhaps don't have so much footfall, and you're giving them an advertising platform really to get more customers.
Yeah.
And once a customer starts to sort of feel comfortable there, they'll return. They might not just return for work; they might return for a beer in the evening. They get to know the customer guys. They get to know the barman. They get to know the servers and the owners, and you see that in Portugal actually. You start to sort of visit a cafe or visit a restaurant, and the first couple of times it's very formal. It's like, hello, yes, da, da, da. And then third, fourth time you go, you start to create a little bit more of a bond. And then, after about 6 times you go to a restaurant or cafe, you're like family.
Yeah.
So,
It is like that. And
I think
yeah.
it's a nice, you're like all good families, you're making a good communication at the outset. It's like, it's almost like meeting the father of the bride or whatever, it starts off formal and then, yeah, very cool.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think, and actually, I really like what you said there, because we do. So I was doing an interview with Idealista the other day, the property portal
Yeah.
platform, and they asked me about, which types of venues do you target? And actually, we are completely agnostic. And I do, part of what sort of kicked this off for me was, firstly, I grew up working in restaurants and cafes.
This episode of Podcast Portugal is brought to you by Flow Sports. If you're into jiu-jitsu, wrestling, rugby, cycling, basketball, and many more sports, Flow Sports have you covered. Stream live events, watch exclusive behind-the-scenes content, and dive into a world of top-tier sports coverage, all on one app. Don't miss a moment. Tap the link in the show notes to start watching with Flow Sports today.
I think the mentality of like cafe and restaurant owners is pretty much the same all across the world, at least on some metrics. The way they think it, and sort of they would be able to relate to each other. But we deliberately wanted to make a platform that also would appeal to the more sort of traditional Portuguese cafes and restaurants. It's much harder having the conversation with those guys, but we don't just want to target the sort of trendy brunch places and the sort of popular hotel chains and stuff like that. Yeah. We do like the idea of creating a way, because actually, you maybe you can relate to this. Some of those sort of hole in the wall, mom and pop type places in Portugal, they serve the best food, the best homemade food you'll find in Portugal.
I always say, look for the sort of red Sagres chairs, the plastic chairs outside. Yeah, you're almost guaranteed to get good food.
Yeah, and the Delta Cafes sort of logo on the billboard and stuff. Like that's how you're going to get some nice home cooked food. But those places can be quite intimidating for new arrivals into the country and or like digital nomad types or whatever, so they often don't feel comfortable going into those places, especially not working in them. But actually, if you're here, and this is something specifically to digital nomads, which I know doesn't apply to you or me actually, but they are a sort of key target audience for us. I remember reading a Reddit post that really illustrates this problem better than I could sort of do on my own, where this guy had basically, he was from the UK, and he'd written about how he'd moved to Lisbon because he wanted to experience the city. He was a digital nomad. He's like, okay, I wanted to move to Lisbon for a year and sort of but 6 months in, I feel like I'm not experiencing the city because I'm just bouncing back and forth between my accommodation and a co-working space. I'm not really sort of like having that experience of being in Lisbon in some ways. And so a platform where you could go and work in some of these kind of hole in the wall type restaurants and have that kind of proper authentic experience. Presumably you moved to Portugal because you want to have that experience. You want to feel what it's like to be a Portuguese and to sort of soak in the culture a bit. And so if you are having to work, it's our platform gives you that ability to go in kind of like in a completely frictionless way, where you just show them your booking. You don't necessarily need to speak the language, because you show them the booking, they sit you down. All you need to be able to say is whether you want tea or coffee. Just learn the words for tea and coffee, I guess. That's all you need to do.
Well, you got Google Translate on your Mac.
Exactly.
So you just use that.
But yeah, so that's it. And so we do want to also make it so that we want to make it a completely open marketplace, so that yes, you do have like mama shelters and fancy brunch cafes and that kind of thing, but you also have the typical kind of local Portuguese businesses renting out their space, and like you said, creating a new revenue stream for them, particularly during the sort of off-peak times of the year.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you just have to look at the psychology. You're going into a space which is a social center. You're putting headphones on and opening up a screen and zoning in on that. So, there is immediately, you're signaling to everybody around you that you're busy and you don't want to socialize, or you don't want to talk, or you don't have time to say hello. And so, it's almost like a little bit of advice for anybody. Like, okay, you've booked the space, but perhaps go in a little bit early or stay a little bit later and have a beer and close the laptop and communicate, or, you know what I mean? Like, because the psychology is very much there.
Yeah, I think as well, like, I think if nothing else though, like one of the things that we noticed was very early on was that we're very popular with the staff of these places. So the owners like us, because
I understand. Yeah,
we're generating revenue, but
yeah,
a lot of the staff, I mean, I don't. So back when I was working in cafes and restaurants, this was not an issue. I mean, this was not really a thing. Occasionally, I guess someone might come in, but I guess this is the point. This is sort of fundamentally one of the key sort of hypotheses that we have, is that before COVID, people working in cafes with their laptops and stuff was kind of a phenomenon. Everyone was aware of it. You would see it occasionally, etc. People would do it occasionally, but just purely due to the numbers now of people who work remotely, it's gone from being like a phenomenon to a bit of a problem. And it's kind of in the zeitgeist. Like if you type this issue, if you type any sort of keywords on this issue into Google, there's tons of articles that are written about this in French and in for example in Amsterdam. It's a huge problem in Amsterdam. Massive problem in Seoul as well, in South Korea. And so it's like, it's kind of a current, people understand that it is kind of causing a problem, but specifically with the staff of these venues, when we tell them what we're doing with DeskAmigo, they firstly they immediately get it, but they also immediately are sort of on our side, because we're seen as kind of like, they've always got a horror story of someone who came in and sort of broke a chair or unplugged the lamp so that they could plug their laptop in and set up a massive desktop or something on one of their small tables. And so they all or someone who just people. I mean, because there'll be people like you, for example, that very graciously would leave if someone came in and you could tell that you're occupying the space, but not everyone's like that. That's the thing. And some people do take advantage of these places, unfortunately, not even maybe unconsciously in some cases.
Well, I think it mostly is. I think mostly it is unconsciously. It's just that sort of, it's just sort of entitlement that's not necessarily comes from a bad or negative place. I think it's just they don't
No, I mean,
realize.
it's, people, here's the thing, like, if you just to go back to the, so with if you look at the numbers, basically it went from the Lisbon metropolitan area, just because I know the number off the top of my head, it was about 3 to 5% of the workforce worked remotely pre-COVID, and it's now about 15%.
Wow.
And it's about 21% if you include hybrid workers, people who go some days in the office, some days at home. That's a huge shift that's happened in a relatively short period of time. And for someone like me, so I was doing my previous job when I worked in Africa, we never had an office. So I was just bouncing around different countries basically. And I learned how to work remotely, but it does take some time. I don't know if you had this experience, but you do have to learn how you have to learn how to work from home effectively,
how to zone
basically.
out, basically, or zone in.
Yeah, you have to zone in. You have to you have to make sure that you can make that separation in your mind between your workspace and your home. Like for example, right now I live in a 1-bedroom apartment. So that I need to be able to make sure that, I'm not always working, like I need to be able to sort of be like, right, I'm switching off now. This space is now my sort of rest space or whatever, the place where I'm going to relax for the evening.
That's something,
as opposed to my office. Basically.
That's something I struggle with, actually. If I'm at home, if I'm sitting doing nothing, I feel like I'm not being productive. And it's a problem. And so, I only stop when I literally can't see the screen anymore. And, then I chill out. But I understand fully
tough.
what you mean.
It's tough to be productive. And also, especially with like younger people living in the city, isolation is a big problem. People, especially during COVID, obviously, because they weren't allowed out to socialize in the same way. But even now, I think like people do struggle a bit with working from home from a kind of from a well-being point of view, basically a socializing point of view. So they do want to get out. People do want to be able to spend some of their workday out of their home. And that third place, the concept of the third place kind of thing, this is where this really comes in. You want to have access to these spaces, even if you don't necessarily socialize with the people around you. Even just being around other people is good for your spirit, basically. If you are just cut off from human interaction, like human activity, it's just not good for you. And so people do want to get out. And 99% of the time, historically, they've chosen to go to cafes and restaurants. It's interesting you mentioned the Wi-Fi issue, and so that the library where you live not having Wi-Fi. One of the things that we realized was that so there's lots of different ways that cafes and restaurants have tried to like limit the amount of remote workers coming into their space. And one of them is I won't mention the name of them, but there's a very popular chain here in Lisbon of cafes, not a big company, but like they've got sort of 6 or 7 locations. And they basically, in an attempt to stop the flow of remote workers, they actually stopped giving out the Wi-Fi. That was actually their policy. They were just going to sort of not give out Wi-Fi. And that kind of organically stopped people from coming in to work, basically. So some places are doing that. But yeah, I mean, I think like generally speaking, like you said, people don't want to be obnoxious, but they do need to get out. And we're trying to build really an infrastructure for them to do that, but in a way where, like I said, the local businesses can benefit. It's kind of, we like to see it as a win-win. I think if you're doing a marketplace sort of business, it has to be a win-win. But we also feel like we're kind of trying to solve a bit of a problem for the city of Lisbon as well. So, because there is a very, very real, I would say, tension between Lisbon's desire to be a kind of tech hub and a kind of digital nomad city where that attracts kind of tech talent, and the wishes of sort of the local people. Basically, there is a bit of a tension there.
Well, there's a cultural thing. There is an interesting culture in Portugal. I think probably also in Lisbon. You have the workplace, you have the home place, and you have the social place. And traditionally, the cafes and the bars are the social places, so you go there to speak. So it's almost like the combination of like sort of either working at home is kind of a little bit of an interesting cultural leap, and also working in a space which is primarily or used to be for socializing is already another sort of cultural leap. And I think it's just sort of that sort of adapting to that, you know. I think it's just sort of communicating that, and I think that's what you're doing, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like I said, we're trying to sort of grease the skids a little bit, you know, because there is this influx of people into. I've been here for 7 years, and even in the time that I've been here, I've seen a kind of quickening of the pace of change in Lisbon. I mean, it's well known that Lisbon has dramatically changed over the past sort of 20 years, 25 years, kind of thing. But even in the last sort of 5 years, I would say it really is pushing this kind of it wants to be an international city, or that this is at least what the local government want. It wants to be an internationalized city, and it wants to be a sort of tech city. And then, but that grates against the sort of, you know, like you said, the traditional community kind of element that still exists in Lisbon and around Lisbon, where you have these places that very much, you know, there's this concept of the third place. I kind of mentioned it earlier. You touched on it there, that you've got home and you've got work, and then you've got the third place where people go to socialize. It's a community thing, you know. And again, I'm sure you'd be able to relate to this, but in the UK, that's kind of diminished to a massive extent in a lot of places where that third place doesn't exist anymore. And it's not good for us. It's not good for a society to lack those spaces. You do need those spaces. It's good for social cohesion, etc. And it is a weird thing, you know, like there is a kind of strange juxtaposition in some of these places where, you know, these new type of people are moving in, these kind of digital nomad. I hope I don't come across like I'm speaking about them in a bad way. Obviously, they're my parish, but they're moving into these spaces, and there is this kind of sort of like they're almost like aliens to some of the people locally. You know, like they don't have anything in common with them. They're sort of forced to interact with them on some level, and there is this sort of perception that these people are, you know, for example, driving up rents, driving up prices, occupying their spaces and not paying for them, and
prices,
that kind of thing.
Yeah,
And so,
accommodation, all
yeah.
this.
And so, yeah, we are trying to sort of in a way bridge that gap and sort of create an environment where, okay, you know, I would like to come and work in your space, but I agree that you should set the terms, and that I should have to agree to them in advance. You know, you wouldn't expect to walk into someone's living room and give them 40 cents and sit there for 2 hours and use their electricity and their Wi-Fi or whatever, or someone's office, or any other business, really. It's only the hospitality industry where people assume that you can do that. And sort of
taking advantage of someone's hospitality, you know. And actually there is a point that I want to make. It's when I first moved to Portugal, I think I can't even remember now. I think it was 14, 15 years ago. Where if you wanted to rent somewhere, or if you wanted to get your trees cut, or if you wanted to get your lawn mowed, or you needed a builder, or what you do is you go to the local cafe or you go to the local store and you ask.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you can't search for anything you couldn't search really in those days on the website for anything like that, or anyone who was sort of decent and got the reputation locally for doing a really good job. So I think, you know, and we have a similar thing here in Beja. When we go to our jiu-jitsu, we have already a network of people that are lawyers, accountants, and we have a whole network that's already there established, you know, that we can sort of tap for ideas where we can get stuff done. So it's a really nice thing when you're moving into a new area, is to have that network. And I think the network also starts in these cafes, for sure.
100%. Yeah, I mean, you see it like there used to be a law. I don't think it still exists, but there used to be a sort of zoning law where if you were building an apartment building or something like that, you had to have on the ground. You see it a lot. There'll be a cafe on the ground floor or a restaurant on the ground floor, and there was this sort of like initiative whereby, you know, you're not allowed to build a certain number of residences unless you also have a cafe. Yeah, sure. So you're down in Beja. I for some reason in my head Beja was up in like the central region, but you're right down in.
Yeah, it's if you drew a line from Sines directly east, it's pretty much there. So
right
down
cool.
there. Yeah.
What's it like there?
It's well, it's got a lot of potential. So it used to be very sort of left leaning, a little bit towards communism in many respects. But now we've just got a new mayor, and he's sort of more liberal. They've made a coalition between the liberals and the sort of the centre. What you'd probably call in the UK the Conservatives.
Okay.
And they're a little bit more open for business. So the idea of Beja, the whole concept of the local mayor really is. We're going to have a meeting with him soon, a podcast interview. So it should be interesting.
Oh, cool.
But it's sort of developing Beja as a hub because we are literally pretty much in the middle of a big area. We're really close to Spain. I don't know how much you know of this area. We're recording this as well, so this is cool. There is a port at Sines, which is basically a port. And there was plans to build something called the A26. Now they build parts of it, and they built sort of bridges, which are really now just sort of half finished and sort of very expensive nesting places for the cranes, for the birds. And so So the idea was that you connect Sines to Beja, so you connect the port to Beja, and then you've got Spain just over the border, so there would be another sort of road that goes out of there. There's, it's an hour and 20 minutes to the Algarve, straight down to Oliao and all the fishing places and that kind of stuff. So we get a lot of really good seafood here, even though we're in the interior. And then you've got the A2, which sort of links north to the south, links Lisbon. We're an hour and 30 minutes from Lisbon. So we really are sort of positioned. Well, I sort of figured because I surf coach, we used to live in Ericeira, so I surf coach there, I have clients there. I used to live in the Algarve, so I have surf coaching clients there. And I don't know how much you know about surfing, but it starts to
Not too much.
Yeah, well, those hubs, and actually there is some parallels between your business and surfing that I'll go into a little bit, but I started to get much busier, and I have clients that want to come and they sort of want to improve their surfing, and they're sort of intermediate to advanced to elite, so they want to have waves where they don't have a bunch of surf schools dropping in on them, so
I get it.
the Alentejo is very, very quiet, and this is a little bit more sort of remote, and it gives a little bit more of an intimate experience for the surfing clients that I have coming over. So, and it's beautiful, and the Alentejo coastline is stunning, and it's very underdeveloped, and it's got lots of potential. And actually, you should think about Sines because they're building they've already finished parts of it, a huge data center there, so it's going to create 4,000 jobs.
Really?
Yeah, it's going to create 4,000 jobs. So from you being from the property perspective as well, the prices there are already starting to, because Sines, hopefully I don't upset anybody in Sines, but it's a port town. Traditionally there was a little bit of a rougher element in there. There was some problems locally with drugs and drug smuggling and kind of that kind of stuff. But now it's with Porto, which is just a lovely little beautiful village similar to Ericeira, just south of there. It's being very beautiful and very nice. And Vila Nova Milfontes, another place which has always been popular with Portuguese tourists. Sines is starting it has all the potential of a beautiful, it's got sort of a fortified wall, it has a marina, it has some beautiful features and traditional old town, and it has that feeling like Eddie said, where it's, the surf's right on the doorstep. It has that feeling. And they do a massive festival actually there, where you can go in the middle of the summer. They have this festival, and you'll every single green space in the whole city is taken up with a tent. To attend these music festivals, and they hold this music festival in this fortified wall in this space. It's very cool. So there's a lot of
That's really cool, yeah.
And Beja basically is sort of we're on that logistically. We're kind of centered, and so I think that's the idea of is to be this hub. There was a big I think I mentioned a co-working space and this office spaces, which has sort of been built by the local municipality or organization that's linked to the municipality, and it's sort of funded by the EU to be a co-working space. I walked in there with Rita. We were trying to find office space in Belgium, like I said, and it's absolutely beautiful. It's fantastic, and we were really excited. And they were like, "Wow!" And there was 2 people in there using the co-working space, and all these offices were empty or looked empty. And we were like, and we thought, they're going to want us to come in here. And they said, "Oh no, sorry, there's a waiting list. You have to wait till the new wing is being
Even
built."
Something like that.
Yeah, but the use of the space was questionable to me because they had a really small co-working space. They had a lot of little offices, which is great, but then they had this massive auditorium, which was just empty. And, how often are they going to have
Yeah.
so.
And did you say it was funded by the EU?
Yeah, the EU. We have a little property in Almada that my wife is developing, and one of the sort of funding requirements is to create a sort of digital nomad elements. So that there is a space in the corner where there's a desk, or there's certain grade of Wi-Fi connection, or so they're making efforts. So.
It's a real priority, yeah. Like they have a special visa for digital nomads. It's called the Digital Nomad Visa, kind of, and I'm sure you're aware of it. And yeah, I mean, it's definitely seems to be something that the Portuguese government is really trying to do. I mean, we went to the Web Summit a couple of weeks ago, I guess. And that's a very big part of their sort of Lisbon pays a huge amount of money to host that event. I mean, maybe it's profitable, I don't know, but it's like something that because it used to be in Dublin, and then they sort of effectively bidded for it, and they brought it over to Lisbon. And yeah, it's definitely something that like Portugal in general wants to do, is to sort of attract in tech talent. It doesn't surprise me. It's really cool to hear they're building a data center down. Did you say it was in the Algarve?
It's in Sines. It's in Sines, which is in the Alentejo. Yeah, okay. It's actually that port. So it used to be. They used to have a lot of big power centers there. So they actually knocked down these big towers there, which were from I think it was a gas works. I think it was gas, where they generate electricity, a power station. But they have other gas stations there, so I'm guessing the power generation is there. But then I think they're repurposing that building. Yeah, it's very cool. But
it actually, is cool. Towards the end of my, because when I said previously I was a real estate consultant, like that was around the time where some of these alternative asset classes were becoming more sort of like, we were being asked to do valuations on data centers and things like that, and they're incredibly valuable pieces of real estate, as I'm sure you can imagine. But yeah, no, it's a really cool thing. And also even logistics. Like I remember reading a report, Portugal is becoming more and more like popular for logistics. Sort of, because it's got fantastic ports and that kind of thing. And it's building some really sort of high tech, especially around in the central region even, and towards the border with Spain, they're building some quite high tech kind of distribution centers and that kind of thing. For the Iberian Peninsula. So it's a cool place to be, and it's nice to be somewhere. I think one of the things I really like about Portugal is that it does feel like a place which is on the up and up.
Yeah, exactly.
Things are being done, like sort of exciting projects are happening. So that's a really cool thing.
Yeah. Beja, you can almost sort of rewind a little bit, sort of 5 years previous to or 10 years previous to Lisbon. It's got that vibe where it's sort of still trying to understand what it is and what it can do. And like we even have an airport here, the A380. There's an A380 that landed here at the airport, but it's not it's not open for business for, well, there is some issues with permits or licenses, and there's big stories about sometimes it's going to be given or granted permission or whatever to accept commercial flights. At the moment, it's a military airbase, but there was talk of it becoming also for, I think, the Porto football team, they use that as their private airport, so they fly in and out of
really?
airport. Yeah, which is strange because it's a long way from Porto. But
it's weird. But yeah, I thought you meant an A320, but it must be a massive
A380. Yeah, so it's
huge.
Yeah. It has all the capacity to be an airport, and we're literally in the middle of Algarve and Lisbon, so the Faro Airport and Lisbon Airport often get a little bit sort of loaded on peak times. So I can imagine offloading some of that traffic, or Ryanair or EasyJet or someone like that, just using those regional airports like they do in the UK, would probably be beneficial to them, and certainly would be really beneficial to Beja. I'm kind of proud of this city because people we've been really welcomed here. That's partly of it. The people here are amazing. That's the big thing. The people here, they're locals, but they're locals who sort of really welcome other people coming in and being involved in their city. And We've
I think that's the key, isn't it? It's like people do generally are generally more than happy for you to come into their community as long as you kind of participate and comport yourself in a certain way. And yeah, if you're sort of, if you're kind of integrating yourself into it, people are very. I mean, I love the Portuguese people. Like they are generally very decent, welcoming people. I think this is one of the things. So we were contacted by the municipality of Lisbon. Well, we don't really know how they want to do some sort of collaboration with us, where they sort of, because they do see us as sort of like, I think, bridging that gap, like I said, and sort of like, supporting local businesses, but also helping people there to be less friction, basically, between the local communities and the people that the government does want to attract in. And so, yeah, but it's like you said, it's just as long as you sort of treat people a certain way, you're not haughty, you're sort of respectful, and you want to kind of like make an effort to integrate and that kind of thing. The language can be a challenge, obviously. The level of English is very, very, very high here, though. It's very good compared to Spain or Italy or something. But yeah, aside from that, people just want you to be decent and treat them with respect, I think, and then you'll be just fine.
Yeah. And you'll find people of Portugal very, very, very open, very warm, very welcoming. But you have to extend your hand. I always say this: you have to sort of make the effort a little bit as the incomer, just to sort of, make the effort, and not just sort of
100%.
Close yourself off and not walk into a cafe and just sit down and don't say hello and good morning to everybody. That's that's part of the culture here. You don't need to know anybody in the restaurant or in the cafe or the shop or wherever it is. You walk in and you say good morning to everybody.
Exactly. Yeah, it could be just as simple as that, just a smile, just a bon dia. That's all it really takes in most cases to sort of appease people. They do, because they are. Yeah, that's the thing. Especially some of these more sort of like local. Because even around Lisbon, you've got places that are very traditional still. Like not necessarily even in the city, but around the city, you have places that are very traditional. The cafe or the sort of, sometimes you have a little row of cafes. That is the social hub of the community. And it's not sort of like there isn't a sense that you're not welcome there. It's just that, you have to make some effort, and that's kind of it. But I just wanted to mention on digital nomad, I'm really interested by these. I'm always fascinated by the people, the camper van people, the digital nomads, sort of people who literally constantly traveling around. Probably they've earned the badge of nomad more than any other kind of digital nomad types, because they are constantly moving around whilst they're working. They're kind of like on the extreme end of sort of remote work. I don't think it gets more extreme than that. But I do think I do just want to say about I just wanted to sort of, I guess, wrap up by talking about the future of what work looks like, because I don't know if it will look as extreme as all that, but it's something I like to sort of wonder about, because coming from the background I come from, commercial real estate, it's so old fashioned. It's really, really sort of like you could still be in the sort of 50s or something when you're working in that sort of world. With the 10-year leases and the sort of gentleman's agreements, and it's very sort of, there's no tech involved in it. It's very, very old fashioned. And what I do like to sort of wonder is, like, especially with kind of, I don't want to sort of talk too much about AI and things like that, because it's done to death a little bit, but it is going to impact, for example, like and it is already impacting sort of the way that some businesses operate, in terms of sort of lower level kind of admin staff are becoming sort of basically being replaced. And what I think is happening is there's kind of a rush for talent in some industries. So my wife, for example, works in the pharmaceutical industry, and that's an industry like similar with tech as well. But if you're not the company which is attracting the talent, then your competition's going to get them instead, and you're going to be left behind, basically.
Yeah.
In any industry where the innovation is required, there's a real sort of rush for talent. And one of the things that I've seen a lot of is that if you're going to insist that talent comes in and works 9 to 5 in an office, that you could potentially risk losing that person, because when you sort of look at the surveys on this and stuff, one of the things that people value more than anything else is being allowed to live wherever they want to live. And very few people can do that. And the point is, I think the point I'm making is that if you look out sort of 10, 15 years, I think remote work's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
I think like it's going, in fact, it's growing modestly at the moment. And there's various reasons for why I think that is, but it's still creeping up sort of by about 1% a year in Portugal if
Mm.
you go look at the INE. And I think I think it's partly down to this, is that like if you are like a Google or a big tech company or a big pharmaceutical company or whatever it happens to be, and you want to attract talent, you're going to have to say, yeah, you can live in Beja if you want to, or you can live in Spain if you want to. We're not going to insist that you live in Slough or whatever, like,
Mm.
no hate to Slough, is where I'm from, but like, that kind of thing. People are gonna value freedom of sort of where they live a lot more. And you
Yeah.
sort of saw it in COVID a little bit. A lot of people moved out of Lisbon during COVID and sort of immediately after COVID. They generally went north, like places like Torres Vedras
Mm-hmm.
and Mafra and places like. Lots of people moved up there because they were like, well, for the price of like a 2-bedroom apartment in Amadora, I can buy a 3 or 4 bedroom house.
Exactly. I think you touched
If I'm
on
willing to go an hour north or whatever.
you touched on that point. Yeah, that was exactly what I was thinking in the back of my head. So we were living in Ericeira,
Mm.
and we were looking for property, and with a small family, we're thinking, we like some space, and it's like, yeah, but the value of the property here is kind of a little bit. We've almost missed the boat a bit. So, um,
Mm.
for the price of a small 1-bedroom apartment that I sold in Lagos, we managed to buy a farm in the Alentejo. We got like
Yeah, it's crazy.
6 bedrooms and an outhouse with another two sort of bedrooms, and that's what you can get. That is the beauty about remote working, because there is no work around here, not unless I took my chainsaw out and sort of help my neighbors with their trees. But there is no, you have to work remotely. And the beauty about that is you can live your dream on a farm in the country, in the nature. Well, it's not everybody's dream, but it's our dream, for growing our own
Yeah,
food
yeah.
and all that kind of stuff. And even like you say, if it's a family, it just requires more space and requires a slightly better standard of living. In Portugal, you have all of these different towns and cities and areas which are just so off the radar. It's not always about Ericeira or Mafra or it's not always about Lisbon or Porto or the Algarve traditionally. It's you look for these other areas, you'll find very welcoming people. You'll find beautiful properties, so much potential, good schools, good infrastructures. And I thoroughly encourage people to sort of look beyond the obvious, and especially if you're a remote worker, for sure.
Yeah,
And
100%. And I think especially if you've got a family as well. Like I think when, you know, if our next move probably would be, we've sort of gradually moved further and further away from Lisbon. Not because we don't like Lisbon, just because sort of I think your attitude, your priorities change a little bit,
mm,
as you grow older. And I think I mean, the dream that you sort of just expounded on there is 100%. I think a lot of people deep down kind of want that, actually, like want to
mm,
be sort of like try and be a bit more self-sufficient and own some land that they can call their own, kind of thing.
mm.
And I actually think also COVID really highlighted that. I think it was such a kind of it
Fragility.
was such a different. I mean, yeah, I mean, yeah, for exactly that's exactly the right word. But like you can imagine, so many people were like locked down in Lisbon in sort of really terrible conditions, basically. Like sort of nine, 10 people to an apartment in a single room. That's how a lot of people unfortunately have to live
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
city.
yeah.
And so yeah, there was a lot of kind of hankering for more space. Like it would have been such a different experience for people living in apartments versus people living, for example, on a farm.
Mm,
Like so yeah, I think that's going to be the priority going forward, and I think people want freedom. I think like that's the natural state of man, basically,
yeah,
is to be free.
yeah,
And the more free that people can be, the happier they'll be. And I think the days of sort of 9 to 5 in the office in the office every day, I think that will be something that will become a thing of the past eventually. This is kind of one of my key contentions.
yeah.
I think it got looking forward. People want. There's this concept of micro shifting that I've been reading about. It's not something I was familiar with, but it's basically this idea that specifically younger people they want to be able to change their environment regularly, and that it kind of, sort of keeps them more focused or whatever if they're not going to work in the same space every day. And there's no one facilitating that better than us, because we're the only sort of platform in the, not to give the hard sell on it too much, but we're the only sort of platform in the world, as far as I'm aware, where you could work in a sort of cafe in the city center for a few hours in the morning, and then go and work by a pool in a hotel in the afternoon, and then sort of go down and work on a rooftop bar by the river in the evening.
Yeah.
It's that kind of like ultra flexibility, I think, and sort of kind of diversity of experience that people want.
Yeah.
Sort of not to be staring at the same four walls every day. So that's what we're trying to do. It's a new concept, and that's brought challenges. Sort of, trying to. It's one thing sort of within trying to start a new business, but trying to start a new business and a new concept is a very challenging thing, and we've had to overcome a lot of hurdles to get people to buy into the sort of the idea basically of what we're doing.
Well, the beauty is your idea is very clear. It's very understandable. Immediately, once you've explained it a little bit, I was like, okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's part of the challenge of marketing, is to get that single message out there, that people can go, oh yeah, it's exactly what I feel. Sometimes when I go to a cafe.
It's like you said earlier. Yeah, it's like you said. It's like you said earlier, or I said earlier about the problem. Like I sort of identified a problem when I was in the website, and we do sort of cut through the noise a little bit. Unfortunately, we're not in a really sort of buzzing, I should say, a vertical. For investors, we're not in AI or deep tech or machine learning or something like that. But there's a simplicity to our idea that does sort of cut through the noise a bit. We do notice that when we do go along to these events, or we speak with sort of investor type people, that they kind of intrigued by what we're doing, because we stand out basically because of the simplicity and because of the obvious problem that we're trying to solve. When I was sort of navigating my way around the exhibition stands at the Web Summit, I did sometimes look at some companies and just couldn't figure out what problem they were actually trying to solve. Like It was an impressive piece of tech or whatever, but it's difficult to identify. And unless you can do that, unless you can sell people on the idea that you've got a problem that you're solving, it's a very difficult conversation to have with people. But I mean, I'm not a tech person, and that's definitely been a challenge as well. Kind of coming from, like I said, that very traditional, doing like sort of working as a consultant in Africa is way more straightforward than working in tech in Portugal. Like way more straightforward. People are much more sort of that straight down the line, the tech world and stuff, and sort of the ecosystem, as they call it. It's a very, very sort of difficult thing to navigate if you're not used to it. I don't know if you've had much experience with that.
Well, I mean, just sort of trying to work out how to do a podcast, just simple things like that.
Yeah.
I think we need to make that effort to educate ourselves. We need to learn. We need to, and it's all there. The resources are all there. If you want to learn it, you can just go online and learn it. And I think it's you need to adapt. The great human spirit is sort of, you get into a new environment, you have to get in there, you have to learn, you have to adapt, and then hopefully you succeed. I've come from so many different jobs and different careers that and I found that the one true thing is your ability to learn new things and to adapt to changing climates. And I think that's
100%.
Yeah, I think
that's key. Cool. Yeah, in fact, I was going to say, I mean, I saw your LinkedIn. It's really interesting. I wish we could have spoken a bit more about you.
No, nobody wants to hear more about me. I talk too much as it is. Yeah. I mean, my mum has a classic quote. She says, you're pretty good at doing lots of things, but sort of not very good at doing one thing. Yeah, I think there is a saying in English about that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. No, cool. But, I think so. Yeah, I think that's kind of what we're doing. It's like I said, it's a new concept. It's trying to sort of, there is this buzzword like the future of work. It's kind of something that people talk about. Generally, what they mean by that is sort of like how AI is going to affect the way that people work or whatever. But I've sort of tried to kind of like hijack the meaning of that expression, basically to talk more about the human side of it.
Yeah.
And so I do sort of talk about the future of work, but I'm specifically talking about the way that people are the way that people want to work, the sort of the manner in which they want to conduct their work. And hopefully, we can hopefully you'll start to see a few places popping up around.
Yeah, I'm going to
where
see.
you live
I'll look for the little
DeskAmigo.
thing on your desk, right? On the table, like a little symbol. That'd be cool. Some nice branding there.
Yeah, or
I
a
keep
sticker in
thinking-
the window. We sometimes try and get people to do that.
Yeah, I was also thinking like a sticker that you can put on your laptop as well. So when you go in, it's like, hey, he's one of those. Okay, he's respectful. Okay, so how does one, if I'm a restaurant owner or a cafe or a hotelier, or how do they get in contact with you? How would be the best way for them to contact you? And indeed, all the digital nomads and remote workers and anybody like me who needs to sit down and do some work somewhere other than just in my four walls.
Yeah.
What's the best way to contact you?
If you want to contact us, you can just go info@deskamigo.com or hello@deskamigo.com if you have a specific question. But we are www.deskamigo.com.
Okay.
We have an app on the Google Play Store and the App Store, and we've tried to make it super, super intuitive so that like anyone can use it. You can go on. Like I said, there's no ongoing cost. We don't do subscription models. It's purely pay as you go for remote workers. So it's the kind of thing you can have on your phone. You need somewhere to work, you get the app out, look around, see what's done, and just pay for what you need.
I'm going to add it.
Okay,
I'm sure you don't have anybody yet in Beja, but we'll work on that for sure.
Not yet.
I'm going to help work on that for you. So I'm going to leave those links in the show notes, and so that people can literally just click on it and get in contact with directly from their phones. So, but yeah, like the website for all the general information, and if I have any specific questions, get in contact with you personally through the info email address.
100%.
And cool. What a great conversation. I was sort of, when we first sort of discussed about talking about this subject, I was a little bit like, I'm a little bit lost, similar to what you were saying. I'm a little bit lost with new tech and all this kind of stuff. I don't know about productivity so much as in the specifics, but then that's as soon as you outline that problem, I was like, get it. Okay, nice. I feel confident.
Yeah, no, it is nice to be able to have a business where you don't have to be an expert to sort of understand what we're doing. You can talk to anyone about it. So it was a pleasure. Thanks so much, Justin.
Brilliant. I wish you all the best luck with that. I'm sure you're going to do very well, and let's hope that we get the message out there a little bit more. Perfect. Thanks, Charles. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Take care.
Cheers. Bye-bye. Take care. Bye.
This is Justin West from Podcast Portugal. Be sure to check the show notes if you live anywhere in the world, or just click on that app and check it out, see what it does. Thanks again to Charles. If you haven't already switched to Revolut, now is the perfect time. I use Revolut Personal to manage my everyday money, spending, saving, sending across borders. You can hold over 30 currencies, transfer internationally at great rates, and even earn daily interest on your savings. It's smart, fast, and used by more than 60 million people worldwide. And if you run a business, Revolut has even more powerful solutions. Revolut Business gives you a global account built for growth, multi-currency accounts, team cards, spending controls, international transfers, and easy ways to get paid. It's streamlined, affordable, and designed to scale with your business. Here's the best part. Sign up for Revolut Personal with my link below and join me on one of the most advanced money apps available. And if you're a founder or a business owner, use my Revolut Business referral link and get your first month with no subscription fees. Whether it's for your personal finances or your business, Revolut has you covered, all in one place.
Stop the train, I'm getting